You think you are in control, that your decisions are rational, conscious, mature. But there is an underground, silent force that dictates the course of much of your life, and it was born with you. The wounded inner child does not disappear with time. It just learns to hide better. Carl Jung warned us, everything that is repressed, everything that is forgotten, returns. And it returns in disguise. The child you once were is still alive inside you. But if they were hurt, rejected, ignored, they no longer trust the world. And they will fight to protect you, even if it means sabotaging your dreams. If this kind of content makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next insights. This invisible wound is unresolved childhood trauma. It doesn't have to be something dramatic or explicit. Sometimes it was enough to feel that you couldn't be who you were, that you had to please others to be loved, that it was dangerous to make mistakes. That was enough to install a silent program in your system. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I need to protect myself. Most adults go through life trying to fix what their parents didn't know how to give them. They look for validation in their work, relationships, achievements, something that should have been planted long ago. But since this void can never be filled from the outside, a cycle of frustration is born. The inner child, wounded and needy, continues to scream, but in silence. The most dangerous thing? That child drives your life when you least realize it. It takes the wheel when you feel rejected, criticized, ignored. It makes you overreact, traps you in the fear of being authentic, prevents you from trusting new people. It's not you acting. It's your wound acting for you. And as long as that old pain is ignored, it will seep into every decision, every reaction, every path not taken. Because what is buried, if not healed, becomes destiny. The question is, how many of your choices really came from the conscious adult, and how many were driven by an invisible child crying out for help? You don't wake up saying, "Today I'm going to sabotage my happiness." But that's exactly what happens repeatedly, and in subtle ways. Childhood pain doesn't come dressed as childhood. It disguises itself as logic, personality, even virtue. And because of that, it controls you without being seen. The wounded inner child doesn't scream. It camouflages itself. It appears as perfectionism, because you learned early on that making mistakes made you lose love. It manifests itself as anxiety, because living on alert was your only way to survive emotionally. It takes the form of too strong, the one who never asks for help, because they learned that vulnerability was weakness. It becomes the chronic good guy, who says yes to everything for fear of being rejected. And each of these behaviors, socially accepted or even praised, hides a primal pain, the fear of not being loved for who you really are. Jung would call this the persona, the mask you built to function in the world. But behind it is the real you, frozen in time, waiting for permission to exist. These masks are effective. They helped you survive, fit in, avoid more pain, but they also cost you dearly. They limited your freedom of choice. They distanced you from your essence. They distorted the way you see yourself and how you allow others to see you. The problem? You start to believe that this persona is who you are, that this automatic behavior is your identity. And worse, you start to shape your life around these defenses, choosing careers, friends, and relationships that reinforce the same childhood dynamics that caused the wound. You become a prisoner of your own disguise. And because the pain is hidden under layers of normality, you don't confront it. You rationalize it. You justify it. You call it the way you are, but it's just the wounded child trying not to get hurt again. And so, day after day, you live a life that isn't yours. A life where everything seems right, but nothing feels whole. You call it me, but it's just your wounded ego speaking for you. The ego is the bridge between the inner and outer worlds. It should be a tool for adaptation. But when shaped by pain, it becomes a jailer, a defense system that acts all the time to avoid suffering, even if it costs you your freedom. From an early age, your ego was formed to protect your inner child. It observed your environment, identified emotional risks, and created strategies to keep you safe. But these strategies were born from a child's mind, and you still live by them. That's why, even as an adult, you're afraid to expose yourself, to take a stand, to break patterns. Your wounded ego has convinced you that leaving your comfort zone is dangerous because one day it was. That inner voice that sabotages you isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to save you from something that no longer exists. It carries old fears, repressed shame, unresolved pain, and it uses all of that as a filter to interpret the present. You don't hesitate because you're weak. You hesitate because your ego still acts like you're 5 years old. Jung saw the ego as only one part of the psyche, not the central part. But when that part takes over, you live on autopilot, reacting, defending yourself, adapting, but not truly expressing yourself. And the most dangerous thing is that this wounded ego has learned to be convincing. It tells you that you're being realistic, that it's protecting you from disappointment, that it's better not to try than to fail, and you believe it. Because it's easier to believe that voice than to hear the muffled cry of the child who still hurts. As long as the wounded ego is in charge, you will confuse fear with intuition, security with stagnation, control with strength. But deep down it's just old pain keeping everything the same. Because growing up requires letting go of those crutches. You fool yourself into thinking you are choosing. Most of the time you are just reacting. Behind every automatic reaction, there is a defense mechanism operating silently. They are not flaws. They are survival responses from your inner child. But what once protected you now imprisons you. Run away, attack, deny, justify, sabotage. These are the emotional shields you learned to use before you even understood what pain was. Today they have become part of your personality, but they are nothing more than trenches built to avoid feeling what has already hurt too much. You run away when you avoid difficult conversations. You attack when you feel criticized. You deny when someone holds up a mirror to you. You justify when you're afraid of change. You sabotage when you're about to achieve something new. These defenses aren't conscious, they're programmed reflexes. And the problem is, the more you repeat these patterns, the stronger they become, and the more your life is shaped around avoiding pain rather than seeking truth. Jung knew this. The unconscious drives your life, and you call it fate. Every time you react without thinking, the wounded child takes control. Not because they are bad, but because they are afraid. And that fear is so old that you have normalized it. You don't even notice anymore when you are running away from what you want most. The defense mechanism is efficient but short-lived. It protects you in the moment, but traps you in the long run. You avoid conflict, but you also avoid real connections. You avoid failure, but you also avoid growth. You avoid pain, and along with it, you avoid life. The only way to break this cycle is to face it head-on. Name what is hidden. Understand that behind your anger, your coldness, your indifference, there is a silent cry for safety. Want to know where your inner child reveals itself most? Look at your relationships. Relationships don't create problems. They reveal what was already inside you. They are accurate mirrors of the wounds you try to hide, and it is in them that the wounded child usually cries out the loudest. You are not attracted to just anyone. You are attracted to what echoes your emotional history. That is why you often choose partners who reinforce the same type of pain you experienced in childhood. It is not a coincidence. It is an unconscious pattern. If you were ignored, you attract people who do not listen to you. If you had to please others to receive love, you connect with people who demand emotional effort. If you were afraid of abandonment, you get involved with unstable people. If you never felt good enough, you cling to those who never validate you. The unconscious mind seeks familiarity, not happiness. That's why you repeat the same cycles, even though you swear you won't fall into the same trap again. You are not choosing freely. You are being pulled by an invisible script written long ago. And when the relationship starts to get intimate, the inner child kicks in. The fear of rejection, the desire for control, the need for approval, all of this emerges with force. You start to react to small things with disproportionate intensity because it's not the adult reacting. It's the wounded boy or girl inside trying to protect themselves. And the more the other person touches your wounds, the more you try to defend yourself, sometimes by closing yourself off, other times by attacking, in some cases by running away. But in the end, you always relive and reinforce the same old storyline. Relationships aren't just emotional encounters. They're laboratories of the psyche. They expose precisely where you still bleed inside. And instead of running away from it, Jung would say, observe, accept, learn, Healing the inner child necessarily involves conscious relationships, ones where you stop acting on autopilot and start taking responsibility for your emotions. You think you're in control, but in reality, you're on alert. Much of your effort to control everything doesn't come from confidence, but it comes from trauma. The wounded inner child learned that if they aren't attentive to every detail, something bad might happen. So they became vigilant, and that vigilance turned into control. Controlling what others think, controlling what you feel, controlling what can go wrong, controlling everything that reminds you of vulnerability. This control is armor. It doesn't protect you from the world. It keeps you away from it. The fear behind this behavior is simple and devastating. Rejection, being excluded, ignored, abandoned. This is the primal pain. The wounded child was rejected, explicitly or subtly, and concluded, I can't be myself and be loved at the same time. So they came up with a plan. If I am perfect, strong, invisible, or indispensable, no one will reject me again. That is why many adults live with constant anxiety. They cannot rest, delegate, or trust, because control has become the only way to feel safe. But it is a false sense of security. It suffocates. It isolates. It creates relationships based on fear, not real connection. Jung said that what you resist persists. And the more you try to control the world, the more you lose control over yourself. Because every attempt to avoid the pain of the past reinforces the power of that pain over your life. The illusion of control is addictive. It gives you the feeling that you are safe, but it prevents you from living fully. You stop taking risks, loving intensely, showing your true self, because at any sign of rejection, the child gets scared, and the adult retreats. Emotional freedom only begins when you accept that you cannot control everything, but you can embrace what you feel. And what you feel, almost always, is the echo of an old pain that just wants to be acknowledged. Most people live trying to appear strong, but Jung invites us to do the opposite, to look at what has been rejected, at what has been buried, at what you hide even from yourself. This place has a name, the shadow. The shadow is everything you don't accept about yourself. Your fears, impulses, shame, desires, and repressed pain. And guess what? Much of this shadow was formed in childhood, when you had to hide parts of yourself to be accepted. Maybe you were told that boys don't cry, or that girls have to be nice. Maybe you were punished for expressing anger, jealousy, creativity, or sensitivity. So you learned, this part of me isn't safe, I need to hide it. But what is repressed doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It turns into insecurity, judgment, anxiety, sabotage, and it resurfaces when you least expect it. The shadow is not a monster. It is a part of you that has been excluded, but it is still alive. And the more you try to ignore it, the more it finds ways to manifest itself. In emotional outbursts, impulsive decisions, silent addictions, or repeated sabotage. Facing the shadow is not comfortable. It is visceral. It is deconstructing the idealized image of yourself to find what is alive behind the mask. It is stopping wanting to look good and starting to be whole. And why does this matter for healing the inner child? Because the shadow is where the child is hiding. It's where the child was locked away when you thought they were too weak, too sensitive, too wrong. And as long as you don't go down into that emotional basement, they remain trapped in the dark, ruling your life from beneath the surface. Jung said, "What we do not face within ourselves, we will encounter as our destiny." The shadow you avoid today will be the pattern that haunts you tomorrow. It's time to go down, to stop protecting yourself from yourself, because only when you encounter the shadow can true healing begin. Healing does not come from the past. It begins now, when you decide to become the adult your child never had. Reparenting is just that, taking on the role of emotional parent to yourself, not as an abstract concept, but as a daily practice. It is welcoming, protecting, guiding, and validating what has been denied for so long. Your inner child no longer needs the past to be different. It needs the present to be safe. As long as you keep waiting for others to take care of your wounds, you will continue to be frustrated, because no one out there has the obligation or the ability to fill what is missing inside you. That is your job. Reparenting begins with presence. with stopping abandoning yourself when you feel pain, with learning to listen to your emotions without judging yourself, with saying to yourself firmly, "I see you. I am here. You are not alone." It is offering limits where there was once chaos. It is allowing rest where there was once pressure. It is embracing your mistakes, your fears, your confusion, without shame. This does not mean becoming complacent. It means becoming compassionate, knowing that your child does not need more demands. They need space to rebuild themselves. Jung believed that the self, the true center of being, can only emerge when the ego stops resisting pain and begins to integrate the rejected parts. Reparenting is the beginning of this integration. It is the rescue of your essence, not through effort, but through reconnection. There is no complete healing without this practice. Meditation, books, advice, all of these can help, but only if you are willing to relate to your pain with love and responsibility. You cannot erase what you have experienced, but you can offer your inner child what it never had: a stable, firm, and safe inner home. And that home is built by you, one step at a time. Inside you there is a version of yourself that was never allowed to flourish, not because you lacked the ability, but because you lacked the emotional space. That version is your authenticity. The wounded inner child learned early on that being who they were brought pain, rejection, and shame. So they froze parts of themselves, their spontaneity, joy, creativity, and courage to be different. All of this was shelved to fit into environments that demanded adaptation. You grew up, but that essence remained frozen in time. And even now, when you feel stuck, disconnected, purposeless, what is speaking is that authentic part of you that has not yet been able to breathe. The discomfort you feel in the present is the cry of your truth asking for space. The good news: authenticity doesn't die. It just falls asleep, and it can be reactivated when the wounded child begins to feel safe enough to trust again. That's why the healing process isn't just about stopping suffering. It's about living with wholeness again. No longer trying to please, control, or fit in, but just being. Jung said that becoming who you are is the ultimate goal of the individuation process, but that takes courage. Because living authentically almost always means disappointing old expectations, breaking invisible pacts of emotional obedience, facing the fear of rejection, and still continuing. When your inner child realizes that it will no longer be silenced, something magical happens. The energy once used to protect itself is transformed into expression, creativity, connection, lightness, truth. You stop surviving and begin to exist. This authenticity is not perfect, it is not controlled, it is not predictable, but it is real, and only it can sustain a meaningful life. The freedom you seek is not in the future, it is in this return to your own essence, the one that was once frozen, but can now finally thaw. Everything you avoided feeling was exactly what needed to be heard. Everything you repressed was what carried your strength. The wounded child who once prevented you from moving forward can now become your most powerful ally. After going through the pain, recognizing the shadow, reparenting the faults, and unfreezing your authenticity, a new internal configuration emerges, no longer ruled by fear, but guided by presence. The healed child is not a symbol of fragility. It is the source of your vitality. It carries your purest sensitivity, your clearest intuition, your freest creativity, and when you stop fighting it, you begin to receive all of this back. This reconnection doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you act. You start making decisions based on truth, not protection, no longer reacting to the past, but responding to the present. Real maturity isn't killing the child, it's integrating it. Jung shows us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, necessarily involves this union of opposites, the conscious adult and the healed child, together, walking as one psyche, an aligned, coherent, real system. You stop seeking external validation because you have already validated yourself internally. You stop molding yourself to please others because you have recognized your own worth. You stop repeating unconscious cycles because you finally see who was creating them, yourself, trying to protect something that is now safe. And this is where everything changes. You become presence. You become roots. You become a source. The healed child becomes a compass, not an obstacle. They begin to guide your steps with lightness, not fear. And what was once pain becomes power. Now the question is different. Are you ready to live the life your child always dreamed of, but never had the courage to imagine? If this content made sense to you, like the video to support this work, and share in the comments, where on this journey did you see yourself the most?